I am Neil.
I'm Veronica. We fell in love when we were 16, and here we are talking about what life is all about for us. Thank you for joining us.
This is a Life Is podcast with Neil and Veronica.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Life Is with Neil and Veronica. We're back again together. This is just a setup that is now working for us. We found it worked really well, and honestly, technology is just cooperating much better with us. So thank you for your patience and your understanding with this, as Veronica is giggling to the side. So I want to set the story, or I guess the background for today's episode, where sometimes we can get in our own heads. Sometimes, depending on the situation, we can maybe think 6, 7, 8 steps ahead, when we really just need to focus on what's going on in the moment. And really, life is not all or nothing. And, we came off of sort of a moment where it was a big learning experience for me, because I can have maybe some issues with what had happened growing up in sports with me, where I can kind of feel things are all or nothing. And really, when it comes to parenting and teaching moments in our kids' lives, that's not ideal, right? And it really opened up my eyes to being a better parent and to teaching more succinct issues, or I guess, moments in their time. So, Veronica, do you want to talk about life is not all or nothing from your perspective?
Here we go. So this is stemming off of a very specific story or a very specific scenario. And, I just want to mention that, Neil and I are a team. And although we talk about life is not balanced, in our relationship, I really feel like we do balance each other out in many ways. Yes, we're both Libras, which I think, sometimes I keep coming back to that realization, because we can be quite different, and, we're all individuals and so on and so forth. But often, when these scenarios happen with our kids, or, even sometimes with ourselves and our different mindset and everything that is going on, again, there's lots of different variables. So in this specific scenario, it's coming off of our daughter's injury. And we just talked about life as a story. So if you haven't heard that one yet, we kind of go into more depth about the whole weekend in general. But what happened was she was injured. We didn't know she was injured, at the time. So it's the morning. Neil's helping her get ready. And I'm kind of listening. And one thing is, we really respect each other's decisions on how we're parenting in the moment, or we really try to anyway. So, if Neil is handling a certain situation, I let them work it out, unless I either ask to come in and, provide a perspective on something, or I guess vice versa in a sense. Does that even make sense? I don't even know if it's making sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
So, I'm listening to them, and it sounds like she's pretty distraught. And, we've said this before, where, in heated moments, we're seeing red, or, maybe it's not even anger and red at that point, but our ears aren't really open. And we try to really validate whatever it is that they're going through. Because I don't know if you remember, and I don't know if your parents did this, but growing up, it was well, you should be grateful. When I was growing up, I had nothing, or, when I was growing up, or when I experienced this. And it's ultimately what we've learned is that's not the situation at hand, and that's not the current situation or what's actually happening. So it's not helpful. But, I think a lot of times we go through that because we're even processing ourselves. So, again, I'm hearing this kind of dialogue happening. And can I share, very openly?
100%. This is, I will fully admit that this was a full-on learning experience, because, as you were saying, when we were growing up and messages from our parents who were doing their best, sometimes it would be like, if you don't do this, well, then you can't do this and this and this and this. Mm-hmm. And, so it's like if you like almost without saying it, like if you're choosing to do one thing, then you can't do the other things. And so it's not to say that in the moment that they were doing something wrong, but, we now know from what we've learned that you can't give your children the best mental health and mental safety down the line by teaching in that way. And that was just for me, 100% open and honestly, like something that I have to work on. And so, yeah, please feel free to be like completely transparent about what went down.
Okay, so this is what happened. So, she wakes up and, I guess in terms of the situation, what happened was there was no sign of like an injury all morning. And then all of a sudden it was time to get ready for school. It's time to get dressed. She's having a hard time. And then she's very worried. And she's basically, I don't know what the exact words were, but she was basically saying like, I can't go to school. And, she is not the type of child to want to, let's say, skip school or miss out on school. She's one of those children that like loves the school scenario, everything about school, everything about routine. She loves, her teachers, her environment, all of that. So she's saying, I can't go to school. Can't really walk. She said this the night before too, but we thought she was just tired and like, okay, for the parents out there, delayed bedtime. Yeah. Like that's a real thing. All the things start coming out at bedtime. So, she's mentioning this and Neil's response is, well, if you can't go to school, you can't go to practice, you can't go to your competition this weekend. And she just lost it. And I could hear her and I could feel it. I'm a feeler and I'm listening to this happening and I'm hearing this dialogue and it's escalating. And so finally I said, I called her name and I said, come here. I could have gone there, but I said, come here. Cause I think she also just needed to remove herself from the situation. And I think like you needed like a few minutes too, for sure. So she comes in, she's very visibly upset. And like, when she gets really upset, she's like super distraught. And I said to her, I trust you. That's all I said. I said, you're really upset. I don't know the whole situation. I trust you. I cannot feel what is happening in your body. I don't know what you experience at school, but you're feeling really bad and your judgment is that you can't be at school today and I trust you. I feel like immediately she just calmed down and, often I feel like we're very similar to the point where it can totally be triggering for me actually. And I need to step away a lot of times and Neil needs to come in and he's the calm. But in this situation, I feel like I could really relate. I like almost saw myself in her. So that's all I said. She started to calm down and we talked about it. And I said, okay, we can decide what's happening with school. You don't have to miss the whole day. Let's just see how you're feeling. We can communicate to your teacher. And again, this is getting into the whole, it's not all or nothing. So, and I mean, like, Neil, I'll give you some space in terms of talking about that situation and how it was a bit of all or nothing in that scenario of like, well, if you can't go to school, then, you can't do anything else for the next 4 days is basically, that message that came out. And so, she and I were talking about it and I just said, I trust you. And I said, we can take this a moment at a time. I don't know what's happening. You're feeling really awful. You're really worried about a few things at school that might, make whatever's happening hurt even more. Because again, if you didn't listen, she had sprained her ankles. We didn't know at this point though. So let's just like back up a little bit in terms of like, we didn't know. And I said, okay, how do you feel about a bath? But, and we're getting, I think, better and more cognizant of like asking, like, do you want a solution? Do you want us to provide some, options for you? But in that moment, I asked her to visualize. And I said, let's picture some dominoes, because, you can always picture like setting up those dominoes. And, she got really into it. She was like, yep, they're like in the shape of a heart. Because legitimately last time she set up some dominoes, they were in the shape of a heart. And I said, okay, there's all these pieces, right? Let me get this straight. Tell me if I'm right. But I think what you're feeling is that right now there's this domino, and when we knock it over, it's going to knock down all the rest. And she was like, I don't even think she said anything though, but she kind of looked at me. And I said, can you picture that? And she was like, yeah. And that's where she said, like, it's a heart. And she said, it could be a star. And, it kind of brought me into like, yes, like, she's a child. So we're talking about this. And I said, this is what we're going to do. Right now in this scenario, we're going to focus on one domino. We're not focusing on the whole shape. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull that one domino away so that if you were to knock it over, it's not going to knock down all the rest. And I think it just, like, being able to visualize something for her, I think that really resonated with her. And again, I feel like she just, like, she took some more breaths. And then eventually, let's fast forward, because Neil says, when I tell a story, I go from like, sometimes I start at C, I go back to A, I go, to Z, and throw in some numbers into that alphabet. And, ultimately she gets in the bath and she's trying to heal whatever is happening. And again, at this point, we don't know. So I go out and I talk to Neil, and I think we just debriefed about that, scenario while she was in the bath and the water's running, and, we were in a different space. But do you want me to, like, give you the space to kind of talk about that whole, like, all or nothing?
Yeah, because, for me, it was also a learning experience about the visualization of it, and even talking about the whole concept of it, because it's not something that really I was ever presented with, or even like, I don't know, like it just never was something that came about, whether it was in my upbringing or even in a relationship in a sense, right? And so I think what really, hit home was, the whole talk about mental health and getting into that mentality of all or nothing now, what the effects would be for her or any child, let's say, when they start to get into those harder years of being a young adolescent. And if you're ingraining that all or nothing in them now, that can lead to a lot of future issues. And so for me, I'm open to growing. I'm on a journey personally, which includes as a parent, as a husband, anything, right? Like I just want to get better each and every day in any aspect or all. And so when we talked about this, Veronica and I individually together, it really started to open my eyes that what I thought I was trying to teach her was actually leading her down a path that I didn't want, because of the perspective that Veronica has in her journey. And so it really was a great experience, not only for her, our daughter, but myself, because, just because I made a mistake in the moment, which it was for me, I can still repair what happened. And we had that moment together afterwards, right? Like a few hours later, and we just talked about it. And I said, like, yeah, I could have done it differently. And I trust you as well. And I want you to know that. And, we just want what's best for you, whatever that is, whether it's health or it's, anything else that happens. So yeah, it was, I'm very grateful that we talked about it in the way that we did, because it just opened my eyes to things that I hadn't seen before.
I think there's a lot to unpack there too, in terms of like, even you mentioned that you're just continuously wanting to be better, overall, like in different hats and different roles that you have. And that's huge too, just to be receptive. It's not easy admitting, like what you said, like you felt like you made a mistake in that. And it's not easy to say like, I made a mistake. We can get really defensive when it comes to, any situation like that. And then, when you become defensive, there's no really learning that's happening there, I feel like. And, it was really like I learned from that situation and that scenario too. And then Neil and I had a discussion after about the whole like all or nothing. And sometimes we're so focused on the end result or the end outcome that we might have in mind. And along with that, we can be so focused. And you had mentioned that earlier, I think about, being focused on step, whatever it was, whatever number you used.
Yeah, focus on step 1 before you move to step 2.
Yeah, like so I say that often now. I actually pause now. I love that Neil had mentioned that in another podcast. So again, like I'm learning all the time. These are kind of our conversations, and we spend a lot of time every day, I feel like, debriefing, and it helps us. It helps me. I know it helps me grow. And so now actually, like, I pause and I go, whoop, like, I need to finish one before I go to 10. Or, try like a quarter of 7 and whatever else. And now I'm getting so like focused on numbers, I'm losing my train of thought and my story. But, we did talk about this all or nothing, and sometimes we're picturing this outcome, and sometimes we're picturing this final deliverable or thing or, excitement or whatever that is. And, to get there, wherever there is, there's a lot that, has to either happen or that we have to go through, or that has to take place. And sometimes we can be so focused on that end or that outcome that we're missing so much along the way. And we talk a lot about that, just even in terms of like the journey and the steps and, celebrating the wins along the way, because they're so important. So yeah, we talk about, have those big, hairy, scary, I don't know why I want to say dreary. It's not even a word, but like a big dream. And in order to get there, there's a lot of little things and a lot of little celebrations. And it's not to negate any of that, because you have to get through that. You know what it reminds me of now? This is going to sound so ridiculous, but it reminds me of like, we're going on a bear hunt. And, one of the courses is like, I don't know, something about mud or whatever, and you can't go over it and around it. You have to go through it. And isn't that like a great song to sing as a kid, and a great lesson that we can all take in?
I wish we knew as a kid, like, what it actually meant.
Yeah, no, we were
took us,
trying to find the bear.
30 plus years, right? The bear was the destination. You had all these obstacles along the way. Some you had to go over, some you had to go under, some you had to go through. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, because now, okay, no, I'm not sorry. I love you. And now you're going to be singing that song for the next hour, potentially, if you know it.
Yeah, I'm singing it in my head right now. So.
I know. I was like doing the motions and everything too. But you just gotta get through it. And you know what makes it easier? When you find people that will buffer that. And, it was just, and again, I think if I can speak on my perspective of that scenario, and maybe you can, further elaborate on it, but I feel like it was an all or nothing. Neil was in the mode. It was get ready for school time. Bus is coming, stressful. 3 kids to get to the bus. And it's all 3 kids usually to get to the bus. Usually it's not an option to really say like, okay, 2 of you can go. 1 of you doesn't have to. So again, it's like an all or nothing, right? That's the routine. You're kind of used to, working in a certain way, working under certain pressures, under certain times, and it's go mode. And Neil in his competitive sports ticker go mode was like, excuse me, no, you need to get ready. We are all getting out the door. You have about 30 seconds. And I'm not talking to you about this anymore because you need to go to school. And, let's bust out some threats about missing some of your favorite things. I don't think it was a threat, but I think it was more like an indication. Like, if you can miss school, then, that means that it's like, if you don't have room for broccoli, you don't have room for a cookie. Like, it was kind of that.
100%. Yeah. And it was just, again, you set the stage for it and benched about it, was because it came out of the blue in a sense, in my mind. And it was like, we had to be out the door in 5 minutes, and all of a sudden now it's presenting this symptom or like pain. I'm like, I wasn't comprehending it. And when you're under stress and you're under that, like, time crunch or whatever it is that, you're reacting instead of responding, right? It's never good. And 100%, the water was starting to boil over and I wasn't seeing clearly. But that's where, when you're working together as a team, as we always want to do and strive to do, is that other person needs to be there, that's seeing through the clear water that's not boiling over, and sort of saying like, let me support you, let me take over, whatever it is, right? Not coming from, and we know this because we talk about it, it's not coming from of like, you're wrong, I'm right. It's coming from you're not seeing this the way I know you should, so let me help you and like work together as a team, and not like spiral and make this worse, because we all know that feeling that maybe our daughter was going through, where you're spiraling into the nothing part of it. Is, okay, well, this has gone wrong, so then this could probably go wrong, and then this is probably going to go wrong, and then everything's wrong. And you get into the spiral of negativity, you ruminate, whatever it may be for you. And if you don't know how to break out of it, it can last for a long time and create mental health issues that, lead to other potential dangers, whatever may happen for that person based off of who they are and what they've been through. So, yeah, no, like, absolutely, for me, having the influence of the competitive sports and all that is like, well, if you can't do something, like, if you can't do the one thing, well, then you can't play, right? And it's just a big learning moment for myself. And yeah, I think that it was, obviously in the end, it worked out because of what happened, across the weekend for her and her team. And, but yeah, we wanted to talk about this because life isn't all or nothing, right? Whether you're talking about a journey in a positive sense or an issue that you're going through, each individual domino can be taken care of without knocking over the rest. And that visual obviously really helps, because we've all seen that. Like you said, we know that if you're not going over and they're all in line, then they're all going to fall over. But when you deal with each one individually, you move it to the side, if that falls over, you still have the rest standing up. So
you can reset, like you can, move it, put it back. I mean, sometimes anyway. But yeah, it's interesting because when, you're not seeing clearly or you're not thinking clearly, or there's that boiled water, hindsight, they say sometimes is 20/20. And what happened was, now that we're thinking about it, now that we reflect, now that we talk about it, there were certain things definitely that were pointing to like, she was injured. She didn't know how to tell us, I don't think. She did in some moments, but, I think a really big takeaway is like, ultimately, to be able to say like, I trust you. It's a big message that I think that a lot of us can hear is I trust you. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, I trust you. Because we can't feel that for her. We don't know. And we're not experts in parenting. We are not experts in mental health. Am I passionate about it? Absolutely. Sometimes I feel like I get into these conversations with myself, and then Neil laughs at me because I like to ask a lot of questions and then answer them. And it's usually a string of 3 or 4. But, I know my journey, and, I know that in terms of the all or nothing, it's definitely learning that was another podcast that we talked about. Is it can be and. It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And look at what happened, actually. So, thinking about, again, life as a story and the one that we mentioned and about the weekend, and thinking about all of the different, steps and things. And, we had this conversation after too, pretty immediate after the situation happened. And we talked about it, and, I think I had even asked you, I said, can we, or are you in a space where we can kind of talk about what happened and why? Even I, had said hey, come here, let's talk about this. And I think it's great to have someone recognize when you just need a hand, or you need a shoulder, or you need any type of support. Whether it be a scenario, whether it be a situation, that you're going through, that you're dealing with, any of that. And I feel in this situation, it's one that, I'm grateful that Neil was able to let me be part of that situation without, I guess, with you being receptive about it, right? Being open-minded, that's huge too. And you've been there countless times for me in many situations as well. And so if you're thinking about, the all or nothing, certainly, what we like to say, or what we often say, is you can't overgeneralize. There are some things that you do want the all or you do want the nothing. But I think the message here too is, again, being able to kind of focus on what's happening. Yes. Do we like to plan? Yeah. Is predictability comfortable? Yeah. Here I go again with asking questions and answering them, because there's I feel there's safety in predictability, right? To know what's going to happen. That feels comfortable. That feels safe. We know what's going to happen.
There's a lot of, ingrained part of our brain, right? And we'll again preface it, we're no experts, but, from our own journey and our own learning, we know that, part of our, brain likes the psychological safety because that's what, kept us safe when we weren't living in houses and we were trying to hunt and gather. But I'll just leave it there. All to say is that predictability, routine, and all that goes along with it is just what we want because that's what our brain is telling us is safe. And so, yeah. Leave it at that.
We're just looking at each other. I think probably, when we talk about it, it's almost, again, more reflection for us on that. And we spent some time, but here's the thing too, is that sometimes when you're in it, when you're going through it, it's it's muddy and it's not clear. And that can take some time too. So, having those around you to support you, having those around you who understand you. I think we all want to feel understood. And, I think, sometimes when you're in it, when you're going through it, it's like it's muddy and it's not clear. And that can take some time too. So, having those around you to support you, having those around you who understand you. I think we all want to feel understood. And, that whatever we're going through is real for us, right? Because we're the ones that are going through it. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure that like my younger self, I wish someone probably would have said to me like, yeah, what you're going through is real, you know, because it's so easy to feel invalidated, to feel like, you know, your situation means nothing in comparison. Again, something that we don't like to do, but in comparison to someone else's situation, there's always so many different variables. And after all of that, you know, of course, we come out the other side. We were dealing with it moment by moment. The dominoes did not all knock over. In fact, I think if we could have predicted the outcome of the weekend, of the competition, after all of that, oh my goodness, I think like, you know, it was something that nobody predicted. Actually, our daughter even said to me today, she said, I didn't think we were going to win. So spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to Life is a Story yet.
Yeah, I think that was the whole premise of what we talked about in that episode. And it was just a big moment over a number of days where we just wanted to sit down and unpack it, because it's probably a story that we're going to talk about forever. And this is just one moment in that story that made us realize that life is not all or nothing. And so I hope that, you know, you can take away a piece of this. And I thank you for joining, you know, Veronica and I, and allowing us this space to be very vulnerable with what we went through, what I learned, and what it impacted each individual and all three of us together. And I think even our two youngest got something out of it in the end, because they saw what she went through and in her journey as her team, because they were there and they don't get to see it all the time, right? Because some of the competitions are out of town. So, you know, when they get to witness these ththings, you know, it impacts them too in a positive sense. So,
well, it was learning for me too. I think we can all learn from situations, right? Like, I'm no expert. But sometimes you just have to go with your gut and your judgment in the moment and, you know, kind of figure things out as a team. And it's about, you know, in this scenario, you know, we are talking about kind of, I guess like I don't know if I want to say negative. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just a reminder too, to like celebrate the things along the way.
Absolutely. Because again, when you take the time to make small steps forward, they add up to the big outcome in the end. And when you focus on each individual step, or if you focus on each individual domino, it really makes a big impact. So,
and dominoes aren't always negative.
No.
You can set up some wicked dominoes.
Yeah. There's a lot of awesome domino setups. I can't do it, but I think it just really is a great visual that we can all relate to. So
you can try. There's going to be our next challenge for you. We're going to come back and we'll probably post our Instagram account or something about you setting up some dominoes.
Some dominoes?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see if I have enough. Well, we got a whole bunch somewhere. So thank you.
I will buy you the set.
Okay. Thank you. But thank you, everybody, again, for joining us, allowing us to share this moment where life is not all or nothing. No final thoughts from Veronica this time.
I do have a final thought.
Oh, wow, she does. So before we sign off, that's why she's laughing. I thought she was just laughing for some other reason. So final thought from Veronica.
No, you know, I was just reflecting that I actually really like this new setup that we have that just came out of, you know, our, again, like non-technology, not being able to record like we normally have. And it's not all or nothing. There was a moment where we were like, you know what, then let's just not record. Like, what are we going to do? We'll just take a break or something and not do it. But you know what? No, you just adapt. You figure something else out together. And, you know, I'd love to know what you think. I don't know if you can tell now that our technology is a little bit better in terms of being on one device together. But, obviously we're together, we're sharing a story together in the same room. We're not cutting each other off because of, internet connectivity or whatever else. Connectivity? Neil's laughing at me because I just said connectivity. What?
I liked the way you said it.
I thought that wasn't a word. I say a lot of non-words sometimes. But it's not all or nothing, because simply put, in this situation, even the podcast, even these episodes, it wasn't an all or nothing, really. Let's just figure it out.
Yes. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Veronica, for your final thought. We look forward to many more stories, as well as hopefully life lessons that we come along and that we get to share with you. So thank you as always, and we hope that you have an amazing day.